married past pupils. So sometimes when their siblings are still in the school, they're horrified to see me at the top of an aisle. And then they're going like, Miss, are you a priest? And you're like, no, no. That blows their mind. But I had another one where we were out on the jetty in Carlingford because the couple wanted to get married in the shadow of King John's Castle where they'd had their first date. And as I opened, now this is what you're paying for in the service. It's not the rolling up and performing the ceremony. This gust of wind came as I was practicing and blew 5 pieces of paper out of the Polly pocket onto the rocks. And I'm like, oh, what the hell am I going to do now? And God bless Jerry, the sound guy, he climbed down the ladder, got them all, put them back in. So it meant I could only open it about an inch just to check that we were where. And as the bride is coming up to the right-hand side, I'm there with all the guests. And I'm nearly 5'9". I'm not a small person. This gust of wind blew me 2 feet back. And had I been another half a foot, I'd have been on the rocks. So I had to make an executive decision and go, right, we need to stop. There was also a terrain of candles in front of me that kept lifting off the table and going back down. We moved it all around to the side and I was up against the wall. And I remember one of the guests came up afterwards and said, fair play, you knew that off by heart. That is what you're paying for. I could open it an inch every so often to check.
Just to make sure you had the notes right.
So,
I know what does the ceremony roughly last?
It depends whether your celebrant talks lots like I do or not so much.
Okay.
I would suppose anywhere from sort of 30 to 60 minutes depending on if they're having a couple of readings or what they're including. So it's very much based on what they want themselves. Now, I'm going to say, again, hopefully we've clarified that, you know, calling me a humanist is a bit like, oh, no, you're driving it.
Welcome, Barbara, to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Really looking forward to it.
You're there with your notes. Barbara's done all her homework. Barbara reached out to me a number of weeks ago and she caught me with her funny email. She says she's a sodomizer. No, actually, I'm a solemniser. So a solemniser of marriage, a celebrant of funerals and baby naming ceremonies, etc. So we're going to kind of talk about all of that and what it means to be, because we're certainly coming out of a Catholic-dominated marriage society, so to speak, and we're fairly moving in a quick direction. I know my own brother had a humanist ceremony. Mm-hmm. So I'm really looking forward to talking about all that. But one thing I did want to talk to you about initially, because I think it will be of interest, particularly to women out there, is the fact that you had mentioned to me that you were a victim of stalking for a number of years, and how you dealt with that and how you feel that, I suppose, you were let down as well. So can we maybe just talk a little bit about that? So, because I'd love ladies and men, of course, out there to know how they can help themselves if it is an issue with them.
Most definitely, yeah. So as I said, teacher by day, solemniser by the weekend. And I'll start off with saying, not a sexual preference.
Yes.
You don't have to go to a party. It's not on a dating profile. Celebrant is someone who celebrates moments of life with you. So that may be a baby naming, it may be a milestone ceremony, a wedding, a funeral. But a solemniser is someone who has the solemn or legal powers to marry you in the jurisdiction.
Okay.
Lots of wonderful celebrants out there who don't have those legal powers, and people may go, well, why would you get them then? But that is because not every ceremony needs a legal element to it. Okay. So if you were having a baby naming, for example, as an alternative to a christening, there's no legal part to that. So you could have a celebrant perform that part of it.
Okay, is there a legal part to christening?
Not to a christening.
Okay,
no.
so it's just
to a wedding there is, but not to the other ones. So that's why it's important, if you are booking a celebrant and you believe you're going to be legally married, you need to check that they are on the register of solemnisers in Ireland.
Okay.
And as I said, if I had €1 for every time that someone goes, euro, what? I'd go, and trust me, if I was a sodomiser, I'd be charging a lot more.
Nice.
A lot more than I currently am.
So is it a busy area?
It is. Now, again, I don't personally perform funerals because it just would not fit with teaching full time. I mean, in general, you'd have 2 to 3 days notice. You're meeting families, you're, crafting the ceremony around their wishes, and that's just not going to fit in with teaching. Fabulous area regarding people are looking to have alternatives, and they're not necessarily sure what those alternatives are. And if we go back to 2015, around the time of the marriage equality referendum, and people were having important discussions about marriage. So if we open it up to more people, will it strengthen it? Will it make it more inclusive? Or will we lose something by doing that? And I think in the day and age we're in, it's important to let everyone have that say. But I just think it's gas, because that's only 2015. And now it's like, yeah, run of the mill. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was the chaplain in our school who actually approached me about this, because I would have always been involved in sort of graduations, and I was TY coordinator for a while. So we would have spent time with the kids going, what are you into? Can we put together a show based on your particular talents? So I guess I was always doing it and didn't realise. And then after one of them, the chaplain, who's a priest, approached me and he said, would you ever think of doing weddings? And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm going, would you not be like telling everyone they should go to the church? And he's quite forward thinking. And he was like, no, because I don't want them to come to me if they don't believe in what I'm doing. I'd rather send them to you. And I was
That's interesting, because I suppose I would have always thought that the priests, they just do it. But obviously what is the point in them doing it if people don't believe in them?
I think it's where I don't want them using the building. And all they want is a photograph, like we're actually doing something that he believes in.
Okay.
Now, I wish I could say to you, so I signed up for the course and everything went straight ahead. I laughed it off and I said, I could be a part-time supermodel and an astronaut as well. And I passed no remarks of it. And then that winter, one of my very good friends got married and her partner was divorced. So that was the first time I got to see a celebrant in action. And I was like, oh, hell yeah, I love that.
Okay.
He came back to me, Paddy, he has become a very good friend in the meantime, the priest. And he said, I found this course. I think you'd be mad not to.
He really wanted to do it, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's really keen to get all those pretend believers out of that church.
Out of it, off of their heads. Exactly. And then I found myself in the January and the Irish Institute of Celebrants starting that course, and it just pressed all the right buttons. There was drama, and I would have been involved in amateur dramatics back at home. Some might say in the home as well, but I don't agree with that. There was all about ritual. There was about connection with people, because you deal with people at very emotional times of their lives. You may have someone whose wedding has been brought forward by a year because there's a family member who's terminal and won't be here next year.
Okay.
You may have weddings where, for example, somebody was meant to be there and they haven't lasted long enough. And there's that whole thing of acknowledging that pain and yet not dwelling on it and bringing the whole day down with it. And I realised I probably had a lot of transferable skills from teaching without realising it. But I will remember the exam at the end. I was dosed. It may not have been the flu, but it was a first cousin. And we had to go down and perform part of a wedding ceremony in front of an exam panel and a group of the next cohort of students. And I was trying to time my cold and flu tablets to be right on point for delivering. And it was delayed by a couple of hours. And I went in and I'm performing the ritual of the hand fasting. And I started to cough. And you know that cough where you don't know when you're going to get your breath back.
Yeah.
And when you turn around, is there a voice going to come out at all? And I was just so relieved. And instead of asking, did they agree to have their hands bound? I said, did you agree to be bound? Again, Harry 50 Shades of Grey. And the exam woman eventually got up and she came over to give me a hug and could feel the heat emanating off me going, okay, that is the way to do it. Things go wrong in ceremonies.
Yeah, of course.
You need to keep going. And
absolutely. And what's the hand binding?
So the hand fasting is a Celtic ritual, and that is where the couple's hands or wrists would be bound by a cord or by a ribbon.
Okay.
And it's where we get the phrase tying the knot. And that's how you traditionally would have got married. And there's beautiful ways to personalise it, because I had one recently where the bride's mother had passed away. And in the braid, they had plotted in a piece of material from a scarf of hers. So it's like to personalise it and bring it in. People can include their kids to bring up the ribbons. There can be, ribbons representing family colours, things like that. So it's a beautiful ritual.
Wow, so it can be very personalised.
Absolutely.
And do you do then a lot of same-sex marriages then? Would that be the marriages that you perform the most?
Absolutely not.
No, okay.
No, absolutely not. There's a wide variety of people who come to me. So I suppose the most obvious one people think are I deal with people who have no religious belief, no affiliation, atheist, do not believe. And I have certainly performed ceremonies that could be considered humanist. Now,
What is a humanist ceremony then? I need to know. Is it just you believe in humans and then you die?
absolutely.
Okay.
To the best of my knowledge, the only thing that is real is this human experience. And so there's no deity. You know, when people go, I'm going to ask the universe or harness the power of the universe, it's like they don't believe in that to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
So I've definitely performed ceremonies where there's no religious reference or anything. I mean, I suppose the most common one that's used with humanism is if a couple want, for example, the Alexandra Burke or the Leonard Cohen Hallelujah song. They can't have that in a humanist ceremony because hallelujah means praise be to God, and there can be no reference to God.
Okay.
And I think the misconception comes from when things moved out of mainstream religion or the registry office, the humanists were probably the first group of people who performed a ceremony that was neither just registry or just formal religion. And so everyone then thinks if you're not in one, you're in the other. Whereas personally, I'm a non-denominational celebrant or a spiritualist. And what that really means is I personally think there's something. I don't know what it is. As a great uncle of mine would have put it, I was born in a family at a time in a place. And if you had changed any one of those elements, I would have a different set of beliefs. And none of us have it 100% right. I suppose the next group of people who would come to me is what is referred to as mixed marriage. And
I have not heard that term in years.
Yeah.
So my parents are from the north, both Catholics, but certainly on my mum's side, a couple of her sisters would have married Protestant men and would have had to have converted to Protestantism as a result. But I just have not heard that term mixed marriage in so long, because even mixed race marriage isn't even really talked about.
No.
So what specifically are you talking about?
Well, I'm presuming it's two people who are coming from faiths themselves. And rather than that thing of like my own mother would have had to get married in the Catholic Church because she was told that the Protestant marriage wouldn't have been recognised.
Okay.
So rather than that she didn't convert, but rather than that conversion, they may come and decide it's not a true representation of them to get married in each one of their traditions. And so they may come to me and they say, I'd like this ritual from my religion and that ritual from their religion. And we kind of incorporate the two. And if you think about how multicultural Ireland has become, I mean, even down to the recent passing of Sinead O'Connor, and that she could be buried within the realm of her Islamic beliefs. It's fabulous to say you are open to choose, rather than if you're going to marry this person, you have to get married in their faith. And then I think the biggest group of people I have are people who come and go, we can't have religion because we're going this route with you. And when you go again, black and white, 50 shades of grey in the middle. It's more, my approach would be it's a la carte. Do you know what I mean? That if there's something you want and that it makes sense to you, you include it in your ceremony. And I find those people can be very apologetic. It's a bit like, well, actually, I do want a prayer.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry. And you go, you shouldn't be sorry. If that's what you want and that's what you believe, you go for it. So, for example, if I were to get married tomorrow, I could very easily include the reading, you know, love is patient, love is kind.
Oh yeah, actually, you know the way in your 30s you're going to all these weddings, I could actually ring that off.
Exactly.
Love sometimes is not patient or kind, but anyway.
But I read it at my granny's funeral.
Okay.
And I'm thinking I could include it as kind of a nod to her.
Yeah.
And that it would mean something to me. So there is also that middle ground. And also, how can I put this delicately? Weddings can be political events at times. Yeah.
Goodness, I'm here for those stories. Are you going to?
No,
We'll
talk over a little bit.
Talk around.
But if you have, say, somebody who believes that if you're not getting married by a priest in a church, you're not really getting married, may have very strong views on that. They're not coming. They don't want to know. If they have a humanist ceremony, for example, that's it. No God, no nothing. Whereas with someone who's non-denominational, you may go and go, look, this is our view. This is the route we're going. And we'd like you to be okay with it. So maybe would you pick your favourite prayer? And we'll have it as a reading. And sometimes it can just go a bit of the way to calm the water, shall we say, a little bit.
Okay, so asking the person that says that they're not going to come to the wedding, why they pick their prayer, the favourite prayer, so that something is done for someone to the mum who probably believes in whatever she believes.
Whichever family member on that. And as I said, they can be very emotive occasions, do you know what I mean? So if you're at least allowing them to feel that you've had a stay. And I have had ceremonies, for example, where there's been prayers of the faithful.
Okay.
And that always causes a stir. Because I always get someone going, I didn't think you could have them in one of them.
Okay.
You're going, but like, it doesn't belong to the religion.
Yeah, lots of praise for something. So it isn't necessarily a priest that has to say it. Anyone can say it. And so can you just say, a humanist celebrant doesn't have anything to do with God in their ceremony, but a non-denominational celebrant can basically do whatever they want.
Exactly.
So, and will there be celebrants that say, no, I'm just humanist and that's it?
Yes.
And that's what they believe in. So that's why they would avoid any kind of reference to religion.
So, for example, to be able to legally marry somebody in the jurisdiction of Ireland or in the North, which I also have that legal power, you must be affiliated either to a religion or to a belief system or to a charitable foundation. So personally, I wouldn't have joined the Humanist Society of Ireland. Fabulous organisation, but it doesn't sit with my belief, because I do think there's something. I wouldn't have joined the Paganist Association because I don't believe in calling up the dead ancestors, and it just wouldn't sit with me. So I joined what is called the Earth Spiritualist Foundation, and they're a group of people in Cork, and their belief system, if you want to call it that, is based around 6 core values, and I always remember about 5 of them. So it's like kindness and gratitude and honesty and happiness and love. And I'm going, well, if we all lived, myself included, a bit more like that, that was a belief system I could get behind.
Okay.
So it's not my job to preach, to convert, to encourage. It's my job to go, you do you, I'll do me. And that's why I called it Barbara, My Wedding, My Way, because it's do your wedding your way. Okay. So as I said, that group of people sometimes come, and when they realise that it is open to them to have a reflection of what they believe, it's like a la carte then.
Okay.
We're not having that. It's like the obey. Or it's like I would have a number of brides, for example.
What's the obey? Sorry.
The vows. He would love, honour and obey.
Oh, sorry, the obey vow. Oh, yeah. God, I don't even know if I said that. It's gone from the Catholic Church.
I think so.
Was it only the one that had to say that, or was it
very often? I think it was only the one.
I don't think I said that.
No,
there's no way I said that.
No,
I can't even remember.
I think it's gone quite a long time. But if you like, this is the extension of that, to say, if you don't believe that, don't say it, and let's get rid of it.
I ain't obeying you, mofo.
Absolutely.
So,
and then the same sex.
Oh yeah, so the same sex marriages, are they? I just imagine them being amazingly flamboyant, wonderful pink flamingos are walking down the aisle. Or is there an aisle?
There is, absolutely.
So just because any that you see, you're just assuming that they're going to be like fantastic,
big fat gypsy weddings. Exactly. Again, I was reluctant to kind of make them a category on their own, because the beautiful thing is they are just 2 people coming to get married. There's no difference. Legally, there's no difference. The paperwork, nothing. No difference.
And there is actually no difference.
None.
The marriage is as real
100%.
The non-same sex was what?
Heterosexual.
Okay.
Exactly. And the reason
came in during that referendum that we all voted yes for. And okay.
Yeah. And so from that perspective, I would still have couples going, now we're same sex, is that okay? And it's like saying I'm marrying a brunette and a blonde. Do you know what I mean? It's like, of course it's okay. But what I'm going to say is I think it epitomises celebrancy, because it's all about the micro and the macro. Every single ceremony I perform is about the 2 people in front of me. And the centre of it all is their love story, right? Which is cringe for most of them, right? That I'm asking you, how did you meet? And what about the first date? And, how did you get together? And there can be some really funny stories, and Irish people in particular cringe because they're like, we met on Tinder or we met in a bar, like there's nothing to tell. And you're going, but that's what you're paying me for.
So do you go off and take their story and write up a nice... Okay, so there's a lot of work to go into it. It's not just like, sure, this is mind your hands there now, let's go.
I have done the impossible, Laura. I am teaching, half a week and half a year and half a day. And I'm going, most of it happens before you get into the classroom. Well, I have that on steroids with Celebrancy.
Okay.
Because everyone's like, you rock up and you read a ceremony and you go away. 90% of the work is done beforehand. It's meeting them. It's getting their story. I suppose I would pride myself on bringing a lot of humour to it.
Yeah.
I think one of my favourite parts is they'd maybe come up the aisle, the shoulders are up around the ears, they're holding hands, they're white knuckling it. And then I'll throw in a comment that is personal to them, that their friends and family are laughing.
Okay.
Like, oh my God, he's late, but you all knew he was going to be late anyway.
Yeah.
And you just see their shoulders drop and they're like, this is going to be okay.
Yeah.
You get their stories, and that's, as I say, what you're probing for, and then you have the whole journey. You know, to use the X Factor lingo, there is that journey of how did you know it was getting serious? Maybe the awkwardness of a first date. Maybe they broke up and got back together a few times, and then maybe they've gone through a really rough time. I would have had couples who've maybe had several miscarriages, couples who have nursed parents through disease. And it's like, that in the dark times of life, you get to see who you really have.
Yeah.
And that we're standing here now going, I
know someone saying that. It's so very true. It's only in those really dark times you see you standing in front of you, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you're bringing it. I don't necessarily have to go, and they've had 5 miscarriages and now they're standing here.
No.
I just have to say, they've been through their challenges, and the people who are there, most of them know. So you bring the absolute emotion out, and then you go back to, and why are you here now? Why did you choose them? And I get to say it. And I'm going to capture what a celebrant does. In one of my colleagues met with a couple, spent 3 hours with them, had an absolute ball. They just hit it off, and he went off to write their story. And 2.5 weeks later, the bride rang him to say the groom had passed away unexpectedly, and she wanted him to perform the funeral ceremony because he connected with them.
Yeah.
He'd heard their story, he knew their plans, and she walked up the aisle about 3 weeks after meeting him behind that casket to the song she had planned to walk up the aisle to.
Jesus.
You're holding a space, but he was the only person that they wanted for that funeral because he had connected with them, and that is why it's such rewarding work to do.
And you were saying earlier that people will sometimes need to fast forward a wedding because of a terminal illness, either themselves or a family member.
And our Earth Spiritualist Foundation, one of our aims is that if there is a terminal illness, that we will perform a ceremony for free, because it's part of that, that giving back. But if we go back to same-sex couples, and I'm going to say maybe older same-sex couples, and when I say that, I mean my age or older.
What age are you, Barbara?
Well, 28 and a little bit extra. But I find sometimes there can be, I won't say a battle, but there can be a conflict there because, say, when they got together, there was no civil partnership, there was no marriage equality, and when they got together, it was like that was all closed to them. And they may find themselves now in their 40s or 50s or even later going, well, if I'm standing up and saying I want to get married, am I like giving in to the fact that I actually wanted into the club that wasn't letting me in?
Oh, yeah.
And we bring it around the full circle. And this is where, why I mention it separately is I always feel there's an honour in doing a same-sex marriage from the point of view that, yes, it's about the two people in front of you. But with agreement with the couple, I always take a pause and go, we are here because Ireland, little flip on this earth, we made history when we voted by its own people, by our own people, to be the first country in the world to recognise that all love is equal.
Do you know what? You nearly had me crying there with the said about like them being outside and not getting into this club. Isn't it so unfortunate that so many people have gone before us and not been able to have their love for each other recognised as a result of that?
100%. And with their permission, I take a moment and I go, let's all think of those same-sex couples who went before, who couldn't live a full life. And now we stand in what is only this year.
Yeah.
And we get to celebrate the love of two people in the heart of the family, and they are getting legally married. And I did perform one where, as I said, there was that, are we not? Well, are we giving in? Are we moving to the dark side? And I looked around that room, like the two guys were in floods tears for most of the ceremony. And I looked around the room, there was a baby and there was people in their 80s. And I think the messages those people got as they grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And now they were going, it's about two guys who love each other.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And the healing that happened out of that. So we recognise, like, they're able to do this because of you and your vote. And at the same time, it's about them. And lastly, I guess I'll just say, marriage is important. So I get a lot of, it's an institution. Who wants to live in an institution? But if you think about it as you move along in life, you could spend 40 years of your life with somebody, be it same sex, be it opposite, and something happens to them. And in the eyes of the law, you are nothing to them. You pay a huge tax on anything you inherit from them. You may be...
Should the law change in that instance?
I wonder, because then where do you stop?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? To go
3 months.
It's darling.
I know your house.
House is mine now.
Okay.
So, that's probably another debate that needs to be had. But, I mean, I'm thinking of a heterosexual couple when I think of this, that when he became incapacitated, the family cut her out completely. And you may not be the person who decides if the life support machine stays on or is shut off. You may not be picking the nursing home. And there is a protection within marriage. And I guess I'm going to say I'm single. I'm not married. But isn't it beautiful that my life is not invalidated anymore because I haven't ticked that box? Hopefully I will one day. But if I haven't, it's not like, oh, well, you failed. So therefore, I think we've come the full circle to go, if you're going, I actually love the bones of this person and I want to stand up and say it, that you should own it and absolutely do it your way. And I think that is what probably same-sex marriage has taught me, to go, if you're going to do it,
bloody first with pink flamingo or whatever else.
That's your thing. Exactly. I'd also have them probably blended families. So we're people who are going the next time around. They may have
good children. Do you have the stomach for it? Like what you said, there is a protection in it. But
well,
bitten twice shy. I think some people
possibly a lot of people, but I'm going to say we have beautiful rituals, like for example sand ceremony, where couples will maybe give some sand in a vessel, coloured sand, to each of the members of the family, and they pour it into a vessel together. And it's like, once it's joined, you can never go, that's your grain of sand, that's yours. And that it gives, like, again, an expression to maybe kids who are like going, I'm not sure how to feel about this,
Yeah.
And it's like, you're in our family. The other one, so speaking of going again, is vow renewals. And I think vow renewals have to be the most romantic thing I've ever done. Ever.
Really? So I would have thought, now me just being really biased, I would have always thought, people that do vow renewals, there's a divorce coming soon. Like Heidi Klum and what's her husband? They used to do feckin' vow renewals every year on their anniversary, and then like they did one and then 2 months later they're gone. But go on ahead. You can convince me.
I have, believe it or not, there's 2 groups of people in the mainstream who come up to me after a ceremony. One group is usually the groom's mother. Okay, because I tell the love story, and if you think about it, in mainstream it's Irish guys, and they're like, I'm marrying this one. Don't be asking me any questions. She's grand, One of the first ones I did, they were both from a family of 5, 4 boys and a girl, 4 girls and a boy, and it was the boy and girl getting married. And the groom's mother came up afterwards going, I knew none of that. It is so different having a son getting married to having a daughter. She's like, I'm having this pink or this pink. What do you think? The boy's like, turn up on this day, at this time, and don't ask anything. The other group of people that come up afterwards is maybe, again, people who are married years, and they're going, we had none of that. My parents organised what we were having, and I've been just looking going, I wish we could have had that. And actually, recognise.
And not an Auntie Betty that we never saw for 25 years, but we had to have her the wedding now.
Feeding her, and we don't see her again till the funeral.
Yeah.
But and then I say, well, I do vow renewals as well. And think about it, right? If Mr. Fabulous had come up to you in the bar and gone, what do you reckon to not only having a drink, but getting together, spending the rest of our lives, buying a house, getting married, and having 3 kids? Are you up for it? Are you up for it? We're like, yeah, no chance, God. Whereas if you were to renew your vows, and I know of a celebrant who's available if you're thinking that you're actually standing on, I know exactly what it's like. I know about the dirty jacks in the wash basket. I know about the fact that you do this and I do that. And I'm standing going, but look at all we've achieved. Look at what we've learned about each other. And I'm standing here now going, I know what I'm actually signing up for.
Okay.
And I'm going to do it again. And they're surrounded by maybe family and all that they've built together. And it can happen sometimes when people have had maybe an illness. They're going, I mightn't have been here.
Yeah.
And now I am actually saying I would do it all over again. And normally it's the wives going, I love that, maybe we will. And the husband grabs their hand and they run away very quickly. Not paying for a vow renewal. No,
Yeah.
you can get that. But I'd say what I think I bring to the table is an intuition. And that will probably come out in the stalking story, that I should have paid more attention to my intuition. I think I have a knack for asking the question. And that's where I get the thread to the story. And a story I'm going to share quickly, which is not technically to do with celebrancy, but I think it hits home how important it is to mark things in life. It's one Christmas in a coffee shop. I was in a mood, shall we say. I'm fighting with someone in my head. And I turned and this little girl ran under my tray and I stopped in my tracks. And I did a double take as she walked over to her sister. And I realised that she was the daughter of a guard who had been killed in the line of duty in our town 7 weeks earlier. Yeah. And she was there. They're only 2 little things. And the only reason I knew it was them was I had seen their pictures in the paper. And their mother was a year ahead of me at school. And I sat there looking, going, they're sitting laughing and joking. You real little kids things. They were splitting a muffin. Is it definitely in half or am I getting small half?
Oh,
you know what? The kids things.
Oh my goodness, my lads do it all the time.
And I went like, only you knew who they were. I would have had no idea they were going through. They were about to face the first Christmas without their daddy and they didn't know. And I went, I hope someone is telling their mother every day that as crap as it must be at home right now, she's doing a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And then I went, buy her some hand cream. Now, I hadn't seen this woman in 20 years. I went, where am I buying her hand cream? And buy her hand cream. And I wrote her a letter and I said, one, I'm after telling you and saying you were doing an incredible job. And every time you rub this cream in your hands, you tell yourself you are doing an amazing job. And I'll never forget it, Laura. 21st of December, winter solstice. I was going out for dinner with friends and I popped around and I was like, I don't even know if she's going to know who I am. And I told her what I'm after telling you, and she started to cry and I started to cry. And she said, I was away getting my nails done when my friend took the 2 girls, because in September he had bought her an eternity ring for her birthday, which was the 22nd of December, the next day. And I decided to do it justice by getting my nails done. And that is why I think there's something beyond this. Because there I was handing her hand cream and saying, you're doing a great job. And every time you put cream on your hands, tell yourself. To me, that's not a coincidence.
And you went on the 21st and it was the 22nd.
It was her birthday. And he bought her that eternity ring in September, not knowing he was going to be dead in 2 or 3 weeks' time. So I go, it's always something more important than go, mark the ceremony, mark the moment, but you don't know.
Yeah. And I do believe in that. There's something in the universe, and sometimes you need to ask it for a little bit of direction because you feel you're doing a shite job with everything. But and that kind of coincidence, is it coincidence or is it just madness? But the way sometimes when you'll think of someone that you haven't seen in ages and they'll phone you, or like that mad stuff, like that has to be. That has to be real or tangible. I had Lynn Mack, the psychic, on my podcast. We had a lovely session together and I was a little bit nervous putting that out because it's so different to my doctors or, medics or, people with science, that are fully scientific. But the amount of doctors that have told me, and I've had a couple of pharmacists tell me. I haven't had any other scientists on, I don't think, that weren't medics or pharmacists, but I will. They told me that after they listened to Lynn's podcast, they phoned her up and asked her for a session. So, there are people out there. You can still live your life and have your profession, but still feel that something is out there that's bigger than the rest of us. Isn't that right?
Well, I'm actually only here because I reached out to you after Lynn Mack was on. I'd had a reading with Lynn the year before.
Okay.
And then I went, okay, she's not all science and whatever. If she had Lynn on, maybe I should reach out and go, there's another word.
Absolutely. And I love talking to I'll talk to anyone that's got an interesting story to tell. I think I probably went down the route of the podcast initially with, people that were kind of in the health and science space, because that's my profession. But I'll talk to anyone. When you reached out to I immediately sent it on to my Deirdre, and I said, get this one on. She's totally my vibe. You're funny and humorous and just putting yourself out there. So it's great. But there is something out there in the universe, I think.
Yeah, no one.
I know what it is. And I don't think I ever will. But I don't know if I believe in life after death. But I don't know if there's something.
Well, for me, I'm going, he definitely sent her a message to say, you're doing a great job. No one will tell me otherwise. And that for me was just love must never die, because the ring that he bought her 3 months earlier for her birthday. And then I arrived with hand cream. Not that I arrived, but just I was like, if there ever was a message I was going, tip you on the back. Then we have the other end of it, which could be very funny. I mean, there was somebody who took his wife to be the awful wedded wife instead of lawful. We've had, I had another ceremony where they forgot the dress, and I was waiting outside the front of the castle with all the guests in the sun, and obviously there's all the rumblings of like, Jesus Christ, how long is this going to take? And when are we getting to the grub and the drink? Then obviously they'd figured out that I was the celebrant, and they all shut up. And then every time I moved after that, they'd all stop because they're going, we starting? And you're like, no, we're not starting yet. And then I've had them come up the aisle with their dogs. I've had people come up the aisle with their children. I've had people, come up the aisle with a parent. As I said, a lot more women now not taking their husband's surname. And again, lots of, you can have first sight photographs where they go and they have a private moment together.
Oh yeah, I wondered what that was. I saw that on Instagram. The first sight. That's when before they get married or after they get married?
Before they get married.
Okay.
So rather than that moment being at the top of the aisle, that it happens maybe outside, just privately between.
Is it more relaxing then?
Yeah, I think it gets over the initial nerves.
Okay.
Because I spent a lot of my time at the top of an aisle with the groom going,
okay,
breathe and it's fine, and I'll give you a nod, and exactly.
I know Mr. Fabulous always wished that he'd had a drink before we got married, because he didn't want to be drunk, obviously, but he didn't have anything, and he says he probably would have calmed his nerves. He was definitely more nervous than I was.
And the other part, as I said, I've married past pupils, so sometimes when their siblings are still in the school, they're horrified to see me at the top of an aisle, and then they're going like, Miss, are you priest? And you're like, no, no. That blows their mind. But I had another one where we were out on the jetty in Carlingford because the couple wanted to get married in the shadow of King John's Castle, where they'd had their first date. And as I opened, now this is what you're paying for in the service. It's not the rolling up and performing the ceremony. This gust of wind came as I was practicing and blew 5 pieces of paper out of the Polly pocket onto the rocks. And I'm like, oh, what the hell am I going to do now? And God bless Jerry, the sound guy, he climbed down the ladder, got them all, put them back in. So it meant I could only open it about an inch just to check that we were where. Okay. And as the bride is coming up to the right-hand side, I'm there with all the guests. Now, I'm nearly 5'9". I'm not a small person. This gust of wind blew me 2 feet back. And had I been another half a foot, I'd have been on the rocks. Oh. And I'm like, this is how it's all going to end. I'm going to be blown to my death. So I had to make an executive decision and go, right, we need to stop. There was also a terrain of candles in front of me that kept lifting off the table and going back down. We moved it all around to the side, and I was up against the wall. And I remember one of the guests came up afterwards and said, fair play, you knew that off by heart. That is what you're paying for. I could open it an inch every so often to check.
Just to make sure you had the rows right. So how long does the ceremony roughly last?
It depends whether your celebrant talks lots like I do or not so often.
Okay.
I would suppose anywhere from sort of 30 to 60 minutes, depending on if they're having a couple of readings or what they're including. So it's very much based on what they want themselves. Now, I'm going to say, again, hopefully we've clarified that, calling me a humanist is a bit like, oh, no, you drive an SUV. And you go, oh, so you drive a Range Rover. And you go, no, I drive an SUV.
Okay.
Like, Range Rover is a kind of SUV, but they're not all Range Rovers. And therefore, when couples are getting married, they can't just get married anywhere. So there has to be an address that they have their legal marriage at. And the reason for that is that it must be mainly open to members of the public. So that if I know that Laura Dowling's married already and I see her marrying that, fridge far down the end of that with the 60 acres of road frontage, I'm going, no, she shouldn't be marrying him. I need to be able to access it freely. To be able to
that's just the law, isn't it? Have you ever had anyone object?
No, never had anyone object.
It always happens in the movies, so doesn't it?
Really nice dramatic pause.
Yeah.
So anybody who gets legally married in Ireland must register their intent to marry with the HSE, regardless if they're going formal religion or not. And the reason for that is that they can do the investigations as to whether you're married or not. And you must do that at least 3 months beforehand, but I would really say do it as far in advance as you can, because, for example, if you weren't born in Ireland, you may need to get birth certs translated and verified as legal from your country of origin, or if you've been divorced abroad, you may need to get all of that sorted out. But everybody who gets married needs to register with the HSE. And the other thing I'd say is probably finishing up on weddings is that, apart from the rituals, is that if you are getting married, I'm presuming you start with your venue and your date. Then you start ringing around and talking to celebrants. And if you spent a bit of time deciding on who you're going to marry, it makes sense that you spend a bit of time talking to the celebrant. A colleague of mine took ill 2 weekends ago. She got COVID the day before. She was performing 2 ceremonies that weekend. And I stepped in for her and I was going, it was so unusual. I met the couple on their wedding day an hour before they got married. And I was going, I could have had like Janice from Friends' voice. I can't listen to her. So talk to them, see what they offer, see if you gel, and don't feel under pressure to go, I need to book this person ASAP.
And do you hang around for the party then, or do you go home?
No, I usually probably went around after the ceremony and have a talk with some of the guests. People are always very interested to go, like, what are you? And why was that? And we liked this and we liked that. So, but it's lucky you don't have to feed me. I save you on a meal.
No,
that's not
maybe if you have some nice single eligible bachelors at that wedding, maybe you might be interested.
You never know. I could have a card that I could leave very much if they're interested.
Okay, so we've covered the weddings. Do you want to talk a little bit? Have you done any baby namings then?
I have. So again, baby namings, alternatives to christenings, and probably include a number of the elements that christenings would have. Primarily, it's
but not washing away the original sin.
No, none of that. We may include water in the sense of bringing in the elements, if that's the way they want to honour it. We would have candles. I've had baby namings where each of the parents light a candle representing their family, and then they take the light from the 2 candles and they light a candle for the baby to go, you've come from all of this. This is the heritage. I've had godparents. Some people just use the word godparent. Some people call them guide parents. Some people call them guardians. Totally up to the couple. We've had gifts for the child. I had one that was only deadly. He was a musician and they gifted the child a piece of music, and next thing this guitar appeared out and this acoustic song was played for the child, and you're like, in my next life I want to be that cool, just effortless.
Oh no,
you know what I mean? Take out my guitar,
just lift it out and just play it. I
haven't practiced this at all. This is just spur of the moment. And then we also have a thing called milestone ceremonies, which is probably more emerging, where people who may, most of the baby namings and the milestone ceremonies are either people who've no belief, but they want to mark that time in the child's life, or people who are deciding they're going to let the child decide when they grow up and they're old enough to understand what they want to get involved in. So milestone ceremonies may be alternatives to communions or confirmations or school graduations. And one of my colleagues, Yvonne, performed a fabulous one for her daughter and some from her class. They did a sponsored walk for a local soup kitchen. So that idea of going, look how lucky you are, and empowering you to make a difference when you get out there. I think they had a sand ritual there where all of the significant people in that child's life poured some sand into the vessel, into the vase. So the child has something concrete to go, I'm really important and I have all these people in my life. So there can be some beautiful rituals on that. But they're probably more kind of up and running. And we always joke, I mean, if you think about it, the kids are going, so you're making your communion and you made how many €100? Yeah. And I'm not getting a communion.
I know. And there is that thing, like I do, you know, for the kid, I can totally understand why parents don't want their kids to do their confirmation or their communion. But I think certainly in my boys' class, the classes, the parents whose children didn't make those ceremonies, I think they made a big deal otherwise, as you always would. But yeah, so that was that money thing, isn't it? Caught up in.
Absolutely. And then I think the biggest growing area then is funerals. So civil funerals, I'm not a funeral celebrant myself. As I said, I don't think it'd suit my personality because I'd be bawling. And, you know, become like,
I thought you were going to say because you'd be cracking jokes.
Well, possibly maybe that as well
too.
But you know, you need to hold a space for them. And so I spoke to 2 funeral celebrants, 3 actually, with a bit of research. And I'm going to say, this is personal opinion, Irish people do death very well. And
we love it.
We do.
Dragging out for ages and the wake and the this and that, yeah.
Isn't it that phrase, isn't it, a bad wake trumps a good wedding any day? I don't know.
Isn't it the case as well? So in England and that, you're not expected really to go to people's funerals if they're, you know, a colleague's mother or a friend of a friend. But in Ireland, we tend to, everyone just rocks up, you know.
Well, I've had probably a very good friend and a few colleagues who've recently buried parents. And you know that self-centeredness that you have as a child where you're like, well, obviously their life began when I came along. You know what I mean? And sometimes we say that in the baby naming, that when a child is born, parents are created. Yeah. But then at a wake, all these people come through the door that you had no idea who they are.
No.
And they have a story about your
half brothers.
Which is another story. But all of a sudden you're seeing part of them that you didn't even know existed. I'm thinking back to a wake in our own town years ago, and Gardia died in her 20s giving birth. And the father turned around in the middle of the wake, and when she was only 20-something, every second person through that door worked with her somewhere. Like, how many jobs did Arwen have? Because like we've had 60 people who worked with her.
Yeah.
And that laughter is really important. So what the guys were saying was that it's seen as a celebration of life, and funerals have been changing for quite a while in Ireland anyway. That whole thing of not having to wear black as a sign of respect, that people are more moving towards wearing colour to celebrate the person and their life. They also spoke about, say, for example, Zoom and the pandemic changed things a lot.
Yeah.
Where you weren't able to have a wake and you weren't able to have a funeral per se. And that if, say, a family member had moved to Australia, now they could be zoomed in. You know, they might do a reading from the other side of the world and they get to take part in that funeral celebrancy. And I would say it's probably changed weddings for the better too. So it's like, well, why are you bothering to get married if you're not inviting 300 people? You know, we've had weddings with 4 people. We've had weddings with 7 people. And I think it's probably smashed some of those, you must have this.
Yeah, do it your way.
Absolutely.
So where does the funeral happen then? Because does it happen in the funeral home rather than the church? Or how does because the person still needs to be buried.
Yes. So I spoke to 3 guys, as I said, and John is in rural Ireland. So John is in Tipperary. And what he said is the change he sees, people are either being buried straight from the home or they're being buried straight from the funeral home. And he said, like, if you think the fall in the clergy, they aren't able to minister to the huge amount of people that there are now in their catchment area. Mm-hmm. And so they're approaching him instead. He also said he would have a huge group of people who weren't born in Ireland and so therefore may not have a minister to minister to them, and they would come to him instead. And then I spoke to Porrig, and Porrig's a civil funeral celebrant in Dublin. Now, interestingly enough, he also mentioned the change in religious practice and the fall in the clergy, but he said he finds it much stronger than the change in religious belief. And I think what I'm thinking on that is, it's easy for me to say there's nothing beyond this when I have a new baby, or when I have a child graduating, or when I'm getting married. But when I'm about to say goodbye to a loved one,
You were
maybe I don't want to
something.
or that I feel I'm going to see them again, even if it is only for that moment in time. And he said the vast majority of people who come to him want to be buried in the religion that they were reared in. They want some kind of representation of what they may have been baptized in. And he also said they both spoke similarly to how I spoke about, weddings. You can have poems, you can have readings, you can have humour. And Gareth spoke to me about, good grief, that it's important to celebrate. I suppose at my own uncle's funeral, I said, grief is the price we have to pay for love, for being loved and having loved. And one guy spoke about a funeral ceremony where the mother had been in a coma for quite a long time. And when they were playing music to her, she wasn't responding to anything except dance song, this real hardcore dance song.
Yeah.
And her toes would twitch. So what they did at her funeral was they stood around her coffin holding hands, and then they broke into dance to this dance song. And he's saying, that's good grief, because they will always look back and go, we smiled and we celebrated her.
Okay.
As much as saying goodbye to her.
And is it normally performed then in the person's house or
funeral home?
Funeral home, okay.
Or funeral home.
And then does the celebrant go to the burial then, or no?
Yes,
they do. Okay.
Now, they were both very keen for me to emphasise there's again a misconception that if you go they go formal religion, cremation, stroke, burial, or you go funeral celebrant and you must be cremated, that's a lie. That funeral celebrants have access to all burial grounds. Okay. So therefore
they're legal celebrants of funerals too, just so you're legal celebrant of a marriage. Is that it?
There's not a legal part to a funeral.
Oh,
funeral. The legal part would be done, say, by the doctor or whatever.
Oh,
yeah. So that doesn't really come into it. They did say they'd had a huge amount of people in the last 18 months who had lost loved ones during the pandemic, had them cremated, and are now looking to bury the ashes and to have the wake that they maybe didn't have back then. They spoke about song, and song hits us all in a way that we can't put into words. They've had people go out to Highway to Hell. They've had people go out to Queen Supersonic. Or, always look on the bright side of life.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think my dad's got a funny sense of humour. He says he wants to go out with a song like that. I'm sure, some funny thing.
Absolutely. Coffins then are also big business. We've all seen, I think, the wicker and the move towards maybe more environmentally friendly. But there's also a big issue in coloured coffins. And one guy spoke to me about a goth, that her coffin was black and her friends all wrote on the coffin in silver pen, and that it just perfectly encapsulated her. And, the music would have all gone in on the same vein. So, funeral is one of the fastest growing areas, but as long as we realise you can still be buried, because I presume you own the grave, the family own the grave. So it's not as if it's a church graveyard. You cannot access it as a funeral celebrant. So in the same way, it's do it your way. Bring in what it is that really means something to you.
Okay. Yeah, I've learned a lot. It's amazing though, isn't it? And it's things that you don't think about. And actually you don't think about death because you don't want to think about your dying but it is interesting to think about that you can do it in a way that you want to do it.
Mm-hmm. And there's quite a number of death cafes that have opened. In
Death cafe? What does that mean?
Death cafe. I think it's come from the Netherlands, where people actually meet and they discuss, how would you like to be buried? What would you like included? What would you not like included? And it's not an area that we're very comfortable. I haven't been to one myself, but it's that thing of I want to put a voice to how I'm exiting stage left. Do you know what I mean? And I know in our own area, I think there was one last week, and they meet every 3 months or so to actually tease out what it means, because exactly what you're after saying, we don't think about these things until the practicalities come in. But it's important, and it can be a huge release to the loved ones to go, no, you know, Laura has it all sorted. Here's the checklist.
And this is where you down her most. Or Tina Turner or something mad about
But it's simply the best.
Oh yeah. I grew up with my mum dancing around the house to all the Motown, so I know them all off by heart. That's why they are the two names that came to the top.
Love it.
So
back then to Women's Aid, I think
we need to talk about Women's Aid. I really want to, because I think that was what struck me a lot when we were talking. I was very interested in the solemnising as well.
Well, done on the pronunciation.
We've
practiced that.
Can we talk a little bit about that? And I want you to feel comfortable, so just tell me the story in your way.
Okay, I was asked a couple of years ago to step onto the board of our local Women's Aid in Dundalk. And, you know, when I was going, I'm not sure what I can bring to the table, but we'll go with it. And I think I learned so much, because you are dealing with people who are in crisis mode. In many cases, they're fighting for their life. I don't deal with users of the service personally, because I know I would not be useful there. You know, everyone would be coming home to live with me. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be able to look after them, and I'd be burnt out. But this was more at a board level, so decisions around finance, decisions around vision. And what I learned from the board in Women's Aid Dundalk is that you step in a crisis, but you also learn how to treat that person with dignity. To go, you are still a human being, you have a life in front of you, and we are going to equip you as best we can to make the most of the life that you have in front of you. And I've learned so much. And never in a million years did I ever think that I would access that service myself. And it goes to show you never know. You really never know. So we're going to go back maybe 18 years ago now. Simple story, you know, in a nightclub one night, got talking to this guy, gave him my number. He gave me a peck on the cheek. I came home in a taxi. There were a few messages on the phone, like even, this will tell you how long ago it was a flip phone. So I'll tell you, age myself now.
Okay, no selfies.
No selfies. What was a selfie? Yes. And the next morning I woke up to a few more messages on the phone, and something just told me, this is not good. You need to get out of this. So I think I messaged back something along the lines of, listen, I'm not interested. I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression. And the messages kept coming, and they kept coming. And then they'd stop for a couple of weeks. And then there'd be a phone call at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And they would the whole thread of the story is they would come like in a frenzy. They'd come in a lot constantly for a short period of time. And then they'd stop. And I suppose, I'm laughing if you were taught some of my pupils to be gone soft as part of that one's their teeth. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I assert myself in a classroom. I get up in front of 300 people and perform a ceremony. I can be shy in some ways, but I'm no shrinking violet. So there was this thing of okay, ignore it and you'll get the message. And I wonder, had it been consistent, would I have done something earlier?
But what was he saying in the messages?
Well, this was the issue, because there was kind of broken English there. So there was also that area that was hard to understand. But it was hi, how are you? And let's see each other and this kind of thing. And then they would filter off. And I think one night I was just so fed up, the phone going off 3 o'clock in the morning, that I answered it. And I said, if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to the guards. And next thing, there was a tirade on the phone. I don't understand what he was saying. I just got my father, boy.
Yeah.
And I hung up the phone. The problem would be I would bump into him from time to time around the town. Coffee shops seem to feature heavily in my life. So say I'd be grabbing a coffee on the way out of school. I'd be there with my mother or a friend, and he'd come and he'd sit opposite me, and he'd just stand, sit and stare.
Oh, Jesus.
Or you're at the till and you just feel the eyes on the back of your head, and you just know immediately what this is. Or you'd be in a nightclub and, you'd be followed around for the night, but it was always at a distance. And then I remember one night being somewhere, and I said to my friend, come on, we'll go upstairs. And he followed us upstairs. And I was sitting on a bench and she was opposite me. And he eventually moved to sit behind her. So he's in my line of sight. And I don't know, was he very drunk or he was on something? But I said to her, look, will you do me a favour and just swap seats with me? I'm going to the bathroom and I came back, I'll tell you then. And she's like, you don't have to tell me, I've seen for myself. And I think I got up later that night and he came up to her and goes like, Barbara going home? Where's she going? And she's like, oh, you know, she's coming on with me. But all low level, if you like, but disturbing. Because this was going on for years.
Freaky.
Years.
This is so after that one encounter in the nightclub, then this phone calls kept happening, but he also knew where you lived, did he?
No.
Okay, but you were from the same town, or he was living in the town that you were living.
And I remember another night, and I still feel so guilty about this, because I think this is what we women do. What did I do wrong? Like, what did I do wrong here? I remember
short.
Oh, exactly. Did I give the wrong opinion? Like, I gave a number. What else did I expect? He was chatting up this girl one night at the bar, young girl, and my first reaction was relief, going, maybe this might change the course of his attention, followed by, maybe I should warn her that he's a bit weird and she should stay away, followed by, if I intervene, she might be like, you know, who are you?
Crazy ex.
Sick off.
Yeah.
And he will think I'm jealous.
Yeah.
And it will just set it off, because that is all it would take. I could not see him for 6 months and bump into him in the shopping centre and it would all start off again. So
Do you ever think you changed your number?
He stopped ringing at that stage.
Okay.
So it would have been just more the following me round in public. After I threatened the guards the first time, that did stop that. Which again plays double-handedly, because then you're like, it's now only low level.
So you threatened the guards the first time, and then he stopped with phone calls, but the following you around and bumping into you kept. Okay.
Yeah. Then he disappeared, as far as I was concerned. Happy days, all done and dusted. And we're going to fast forward now to the pandemic. And in the middle of it, so I would have been teaching online at the time, I got a message from a colleague to go, oh my God, Barbara, I have a new tenant moved in. And as soon as I heard that, my stomach just sank. And she went, and another friend was round and your name was mentioned. And when she left, he asked me, could I see a photograph of you? And when I showed him the photograph, he started to cry and he said, I have come back to marry that girl. She's the love of my life and I'm going to marry her. And so I told him you were single, and I'm like, oh, tell him. And then I'm like, oh no. I actually wasn't single at the time, but that's another story. And I'm like, don't tell him where I live, don't tell him, anything. And then I'm thinking, we're in pandemic times, so we're not in lockdown, but we're in like restrictions. And I'm thinking, she's now in the house on her own with him. How do I warn her and not frighten her? And I just was like, he's a bit strange. If I were you, I would maybe not take him in. Ask no remarks. School opened up again, and then we were in, and as she says, oh yeah, I told him, he wasn't too happy. But anyway, and the problem is, in the meantime,
I think, so sorry, was he a tenant of hers and then she booted him out?
No, she didn't boot him out. He was a tenant of hers, and so he was living with her.
Okay, and when she told him, you said that when she told him he wasn't a bit happy, when she told him what?
That I wasn't single.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, sorry. And we opened it up and I said, how is that all going? And she's like, sure, I go home from work every day. And he's going, and how is the Spanish teacher my future wife? And I'm like, oh no, it's all fine. So the problem is, now he knows my surname. Now he knows where I work. Now he knows about my wedding business. And this girl and I would have a birthday within a week of each other. So there's pictures on the internet of the two of us out celebrating. So I started getting messages on social media. And, this is where I thought, this is imposter syndrome. I haven't been sexually assaulted. I haven't been threatened. But yet there was just this starting to look over your shoulder. You're like, when is he going to turn up? Is he going to turn up at work? And it's a horrible state, because you're losing sleep. You're annoyed at yourself for losing sleep. You're frustrated. You want to get this sorted out. And yet it's out of your control. And I'm also going to say, we women can be very hard on each other. Because on the one hand, not too many people know this story, and there'll be people listening to this going, I know you 20 years and I knew none of this. You've women going, that's really disturbing, Barbara, you want to mind yourself. But you also have women going, hold on a second here, you're whinging about being single, and where do you meet somebody when you're in your 40s? There's this guy that's mad about you and you won't even go on a date with him. And it was just that sense of like,
who wants to go on a date with someone like that?
And it's back to you're overreacting. So, you know what I mean? You're out of order. And I just say, I suppose if other women are listening, just go, you don't know what it's like. You know what I mean? You don't know what it's like. Because let's face it, being a woman, you are vulnerable. We may be equal on so many levels, but simply being a woman, you're vulnerable. Because we haven't got the same, strength in an attack. So therefore, it's the peace of mind that goes. And I think what I probably did was I stopped telling certain people certain things. And that was the first time I approached the guards. And I approached a girl I knew whose husband was a guard. And the answer I got back to that was, no, don't deal with that. No, I don't know who'd deal with that. No. And I think he probably reaffirmed to me, you're making a big deal out of this. But I was still scared.
And you live by yourself?
No, I live with family.
Oh, good.
So, but you're there going, I know, thank you.
Oh.
But it's again, you're not going, what happens if he finds out where I live? Are we going to be watched? What's going to happen? Moving the story, I'm talking, I thought my Facebook was private, but it was. And I could wake up and there'd be 10 comments on photo. You're talking about like photographs from 2018. So we'd obviously a whole lot, pictures of nieces, views, and, comments made. And it's intrusion. Going between and one shout. And you need to stop and leave me alone. And I could do time I reaching out to the guard. A guard said, all I have is a first name, and I have these profiles that I've blocked with a version of a second name. Can you check? No, wouldn't be able to check. No. And I'm like, well, have you not got a computer there? And there was a bit of this. No, not coming up. So we no more looked. And I said, well, I'm really scared. And if you consider in domestic violence, it takes 35 attempts for a woman on average to leave a domestic violence situation. And that is when she is being beaten to a pulp. So how much longer does it take a woman? Well, in my case, it took probably 16 years to approach the authorities and say, I'm scared and I don't know what to do. And that phone call, basically, without saying it in so many words, was along the lines of, if a guy fancies you, can you not take the compliment, block him and ignore it? I just felt kicked to the stomach. And I'm like, but what happens if I get out of the supermarket tonight at 10 o'clock and he's standing there? What do I do? And he goes, call the guards. And I'm like, yeah, because this is going so well. I really trust you.
Yeah.
And he ended that phone call with the comment, you're putting me in a very awkward position here. And I said, I'm putting you in an awkward position. And he says, well, yeah, if something happens, I'm going to be in trouble because there's a log now that you reached out to me for help. Now, if you even think that through, so in other words, if he physically assaults you, sexually assaults you, kidnaps you, murders you, you're causing problems for me. And I came off the phone and it is the loneliest and the lowest that I ever felt in my entire life. And I remember turning to my mother and I said, you know what, I can understand why women don't come forward. And she goes, well, why do you say that? And I said, because I've never been intimate with this man. I don't have children with him. I'm not financially dependent on him. He is actually nothing in my entire life. And I've just been made to feel like a stupid woman. How must you feel when you've been emotionally attached to them, or, you know what I mean? How low must you feel that you can understand why women don't come forward? And there was another barrage. It was bizarre. He had the wedding email, obviously, at that stage. I considered closing down my social media for the wedding business just to get rid of him. And then I went, I'm not feeling that. I've worked very hard for that. But I'm talking about getting emails which are like, to the beautiful, slightly shy, woman. And then there'd be pictures like of paintings that was snow, I think that in February, of children playing in the snow. And then the next morning there'd be another picture of like silk sheets with roses on the bed. And then he sent me 2 pictures of himself. And everyone's like, all right, so you got a dick pic. Do you know what? If it had been a dick pic, I would have gone, well, at least I know what the thinking is behind this. It wasn't. It's just a picture of him having dinner or a picture of him visiting somewhere. And in some ways it was more disturbing because I'm going, what is that supposed to mean? Like, what is that supposed to get me to do? And again, I'm going to say some women were very like, it's not a nude picture, so what are you bothered about? But in the big scheme of things, it's like, it's just another thing. And I went to my father and I said, I have to do something about this. I cannot take this anymore. Now, you bear in mind, I'm going into school. I'm kind of keeping the story to myself because I don't know what's going back via.
And it's via social media he's now contacting you? It's not your phone number? Okay.
No, or email, or the wedding email. And I'm going in and class is all like, yes, fine, here we go, run of the mill business, and then go. Yes, muy bien. But it was horrible. And I said to Dad, I need to make a statement. I need to do something about this, but I am not going in to be treated like that again. And he reached out to someone he knew had a son in the Guards. And thankfully, that man reached out to a colleague to deal with me. And 2 things had changed at that stage. The first thing was Ashling Murphy had been murdered in broad daylight at 4:00 in the afternoon. And I think that poor girl's death changed so much. Because all of a sudden, it wasn't this random woman in a house with 4 kids killed by their partner, or a member of the, immigrant community, for want of a better way of putting it, where it's like that only happens to them. And while Ashling Murphy didn't die directly as a result of domestic violence, she gave a voice and a face to violence against women that I think rocked the core of Irish society. I mean, the vigils and all the rest of it. And I know in our own case, we needed accommodation more during the pandemic in Women's Aid Dundalk than we did before, because now women were locked in the house with their abuser 24/7. There was no escape because we were locked down. And instead the restrictions came in, which meant that the people in the refuge had to actually be cut down, because your bubble upstairs and your bubble downstairs meant you couldn't mix families. And it was after the death of Ashling Murphy that the council actually turned around and went, we're going to have to take action here, and more accommodation came on stream. And I remember at the time I was doing a walk, a 10-week, I walked every day for 10 weeks for Women's Aid Dundalk. And, you don't think it's affecting you because you're getting on with life. But some poor guy came running around, so it's like October time in the dark, and he stepped on a manhole cover. And I screamed the place down, and I'm like all embarrassed. I'm going, I'm really sorry. And he's like running the far side of the road, because around that time of Ashling Murphy, they were like so hyper aware that you may be afraid. I had a neighbour pull the car in beside me to make a joke, and I screamed in his face because I had the ear pods in.
Yeah.
So the first I knew was when it was right beside me. And you're battling between, people going, well, just don't go out walking. But like, what do? Do you live in the house and make your life smaller?
Yeah.
Because of this. And the other thing that changed is, and God bless her, is that guard that I got, because one of her friends had been stalked by an ex, and she knew exactly where this was coming from and exactly the personal effect that it had. But actually, sorry, I did skip a part, which is I reached out to Women's Aid, the manager of Women's Aid Dundalk, before this to go.
You were working on the board of Women's Aid Dundalk at the time, and but you didn't consider this to be something that warranted their support. Okay,
it's not domestic violence,
isn't it? How, even though you were working for them, you didn't think that this is important enough to bring to their attention.
And I'm going, how stupid am I? It's Women's Aid.
I know that, but don't say you're stupid. It's more isn't it more the importance that we're placing upon domestic violence, upon stalking, upon all of these things that happen with women in society, and how it makes women who want to come out and say it makes them how they feel and how oppressed they feel.
And it's women's aid. It's not domestic violence aid.
So it's all women.
It's women who have a problem. And the only reason I reached out to the manager was like, I wasn't actually going back to the guards at that stage. So I did skip that bit because I've been twice. No help, no point. And she knows me since I was a child. I was at school with her son and she listened, and I'll never forget those words. She went, Barbara, hold on. The very next morning, your gut feeling told you this is wrong. So do not doubt yourself. I hear the doubts, the questioning, the, justifying. I would have been saying things like, he's not from Ireland. Maybe this is natural in his country. And, it's a cultural difference. And she says, no excuses for none of that. Or maybe trying to make myself feel safer as well. To go, it's not as sinister as it seems. And she said, I want you to ring the helpline. I would never have rung the helpline because I'm going, there's some woman being battered to death in her house who needs it. They gave me the best advice. And one of the main pieces of advice was, do not respond. Do not answer the email, because what is going to happen then is every time he wants a reaction, he reaches out and he sends something else. Screenshot, document, and don't discuss it with other people. And they gave me the confidence to go back to the guards.
And that brought you to this ban, Gardia.
Exactly.
Okay, so how did she help you then?
She took me seriously. Oh my God.
You say that, like the fact that it was a big relief for someone to actually take it seriously.
And when she sat down to take a statement, she said, the longest statement I think I've ever taken is 7 pages, and mine was 9 pages. And I'm going like, but it's like sitting in a coffee shop and staring at me, or leaving the coffee shop when I'm leaving the coffee shop. Do you know what I mean? It's not technically illegal, but it's disturbing. And she turned around, she says, no, we're going to sort this out. And after, she kept me in the loop every step of the way. I found out where he was from, I knew where he was living, and they're going, we're just building it up to see what is going on here. And I'll also say, fair play to her. I had said I had been before to the guards, and she figured out who it was I had gone to, and she read him out of it and said,
She did.
if you didn't want to deal with it, you should have passed it on. She said, this girl is scared, and I'm scared for her because I have seen what is going on here, and you should have dealt with it. And I thought, fair play. It's not an easy mindset to change. And I'll also say, we have had a guard in our town killed helping a woman leave a domestic violence situation. Our Gardia work very hard. They're very overstretched. I'm not making light of the job that they do, but I'm comparing it to me as a teacher. If a child comes to me with a disclosure, I am legally obliged to pass that on to a designated liaison person. I don't have the right to say, this child's a liar. They're always lying. I'm not telling anybody this. Legally obliged. And what's more, if I feel that DLP is not taking it seriously enough, I am also now legally obliged to go above their head and take it to the next level. So I don't understand how somebody who is in charge of enforcing the law can look and go, yeah, stupid woman, do you know what I mean? Fella fancy there, get on with it. And there was a warrant issued for his arrest, and I believe all of that is ongoing. But I've since spoken to other people who are actually teachers who have been, for example, stalked by students. And if you think about it, teachers are primarily female. And there's definitely a loophole there at the moment where it's like, well, they're minors and you're an adult. Should you not be able to handle this? And I'm telling you, Laura, this shattered my vision of myself. I'm an independent woman that I've branched out to this business. Do you know what I mean? I'm proactive, and it made me just go, did I do something wrong? Am I making a big deal of it? And you think about the whole situation that there is at the minute, the Anna Creagle case, the porn that our boys in particular are being exposed to, their sense of that toxic masculinity. And should the focus of their attention become their teacher? it should not be treated any differently than if it were their classmate. So I guess I was in two minds about bringing this up, and I'm very happy that it's in such a safe space. But I will say, if there's a woman out there, there's something wrong and I'm afraid, start with Women's Aid.
Okay.
Do not be talked down or talked out of your feeling. And, you know, there's a lady in my town who was stabbed to death in front of her 6-year-old because her downstairs neighbour became obsessed with her and she rebuffed his advances. And I don't know if people could even name that in my town, because she was a member of the Eastern European community, and there's that sense of it's more acceptable. It never happened to an Irish woman. So do not be talked out of it. But if we're going to bring it the full circle, for me, it would say that gut feeling of mine needs to be honoured, and I get to bring that into my celebrancy work.
Yeah.
That stand up and own who you are. And if you are going, it's not overly romanticised. I want to get married. I want to stand up and say my personal vows in front of the people I love. Then own it and do it 110%.
I love the way you brought it back to the celebrancy there. Very clever. I mean, usually I'm the one that has to do the full circle thing, but you've actually done it for me. You've actually done it for me. I could listen to you for ages, and I think that what this conversation, the latter part of our conversation, has brought up for me is the fact that there can be very low level intimidation of women, be it in their own home or outside of the home. And women need to go with their gut and they need to get the help. Is there, though, the resources out there for them to get the help that they need? Where do you stand now with this yourself?
As in my personal...
As in your personal stalking experience, has it stopped since the warrants went out for his arrest?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How long ago was that?
That's probably 2 to 3 years ago, 2 years ago.
Okay.
But the thing is, I was contacted by the Gardia in the meantime because he moved out of that house and into another house. And there was some incident in the next house. But this is also bringing up that thing of, mental health issues are very hard to police.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore it gives some people an excuse. And the other thing I'll say, somebody who really needs to look at themselves is Meta. Because this was during lockdown when it really kicked off. And the amount of times I went to block and report, and then you'd be answering questions, and then you'd be sent to an article, and then you'd be told, so did this answer your question? And then you'd be bounced off again.
Blocking and thinking, oh yes, of course.
Sent it on, and you wanted to speak to somebody, and then you get a report 3 days later to go, this has been dealt with. And there was nothing stopping him, I'm presuming from the same IP address, to set up another profile. And I know of women who say where it's their partner, their ex-partner that's stalking, they have spyware on their phone. You know what I mean? They're following them in various different ways. And, I've heard Elaine Crowley speak recently about her scams where her pictures are being used for weight loss drugs that are nothing to do with her. And to hear Meta do not give a damn. And surely they have a duty of care. Because, I'm likening this to, I'm teaching consent in relationships and sexuality classes in school. And there were times where I was looking on, I'm telling teenage girls, it's your body, and you say yes or no to anything that happens to you. And if something has happened across that line, you need to move it on. And I was going, do I really believe that?
Because I wasn't listening to you when I brought it to...
Look at that Belfast rape trial. We're going, if you tanned your entire body, you were really up for sex and you changed your mind. I think it brings that whole issue back up to go, no, I don't think Meta are living up to their duty of care. I think, I'm hoping, if anything comes out of this, somebody's going, yeah, this is disturbing and I'm going to do something before it becomes something very serious. And I'm hoping, I will say, I also emailed after my dealings with them because I'm a teacher. I'm going, parents are very quick to pick up the phone if they think you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And my poor wee child is getting the rough end of the stick. They're not so quick to pick up the phone and go, listen, we want to thank you for what you did for her because, it made a big difference. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, am I going to ring the guards and then say, I want to complain about the 2 people I dealt with beforehand? And I'm going, I don't think that's going to have an effect. So what I did was I emailed her superior, her superintendent, And I thanked them for what they had done. I said my initial experience had not been positive, but I said, in light of the Ashling Murphy murder, in light of the new view there is on violence against women or threatening behaviour, this guard should be the go-to person in your station for any of your colleagues who feel that they don't know how to properly handle it. She took me seriously, she guided me every step of the way, and she did everything within her power. Because I think we need to acknowledge the good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it probably gets us a lot more than the complaining. So find the superstar and make them the superstar. And
this is the way to do it. Yeah.
Interesting that it was a woman that helped you in the end, though, isn't it?
Absolutely. And she did say, maybe the colleagues, you've never been in that situation. I was leaving bars early to make sure I had a taxi home rather than to be standing around the street. Men don't generally have that experience. Not to say there aren't men who are abused as well.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying we have that vulnerability as a woman that we maybe don't have if you're a male.
So much food for thought in this podcast. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Wow. Wait, I need to ask you, what advice you give young people today now.
I'm a teacher, so should I take out the list? No, I did think about this, and I would say my advice to young people is look for the sweet spot. I deal with a lot of kids now who are like, everything that happens to me is someone else's fault. It's my parents, it's my teachers, it's my friends, it's the pandemic, it's this. And I would say that's a lie. Because if you believe that you can do nothing to change your situation, you're going nowhere. I'd also deal with a lot of young people who are like, everything that happens is my fault. I'm not good enough. I'm not slim enough. I'm not intelligent enough. I'm not enough. And I'd say that's also a lie. Because you're only one person, you can't change the world on your own. So I would say they should look for the sweet spot in the middle and go, some of it must be my fault. Some of it must be what I'm doing. What can I do to change that? And others need to look and go, it's not all my fault. What is actually mine? And that if they embrace that sweet spot in the middle, well, they can do amazing things. Amazing things.
Lovely. And what's the meaning of life, Barbara?
I'll have to go the cliche, won't I? I'll have to go with love. Because have a family full of love and excitement for a new baby, bringing them into the world and everything in front of them. A family full of love for a child moving from one stage of life to another. A couple getting up, making vows or renewing vows, going, I love this person and I'm so glad I get to celebrate it. And loved ones saying goodbye to loved ones and going, I feel like this because I loved and I was loved. And I think it all probably comes back to self-love, isn't it? And how lucky we are to be able to love in this day and age. So big Valentine heart, pink flamingo and a bit of love.
I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Barbara, thank you so much for joining us.
So much.
Where can people find you?
So I'm on social media. It is Facebook, Barbara, My Wedding, My Way, and at Instagram, at Barbara, My Wedding, My Way.
Lovely.
And get in contact.
Absolutely.